Tonight, Green Arrow looks to the past in order to explain the ongoing plot. Dial H looks to the past in order to explain the ongoing plot. And Swamp Thing looks to the... you get it by now. They all do that expository thing. All that and more tonight on the Not So New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 92 of the Not So New 52. I am your host, and if you didn't catch last week's episode 91, I kind of broke a little bit. I had a fifth week, so I was talking about a bunch of backup stories that had been building up over the course of 5 months, and it was just a lot. It was a lot going on. It was too much to do, but I did it, and in reward for my bravery and ability to do way too much, DC has decided that this month, and specifically this week as well, they're barely putting out any comics. This week only has 11 comics coming out, and I don't understand how DC can do that. Where the prior month, there was a week where there were 17 comics, and then this month the most we get is 15 with a low of 10. Who's steering the boat? Regardless, you're not here to hear me complain. You're here to hear me talk about comics. So let me tell you what's coming out this week. This week we have new issues of Detective Comics, Batwing, Action Comics, Green Lantern, Earth 2, Green Arrow, The Movement, Stormwatch, Dial H, The Phantom Stranger, now possibly going under the name of Trinity of Sin, The Phantom Stranger, unimportant though, and Swamp Thing. Out of note of that, I think the only big one here is Green Lantern. This is the first issue to be published after Jeff Johns wrapped up his massive saga. So this is Robert Venditti's first book. I mean, I don't want to give away my views too early on here. I'd like you to watch the review, but it's okay. And yeah, that's basically the long and short of it. So no big news, nothing I really need to talk about. Let's just jump right into Detective Comics. Detective Comics number 21, written by John Layman, art by Scot, Eaton. So this is kind of the start of a new arc. We, of course, were dealing with all the Emperor Penguin stuff, and that wrapped up with a mystery woman appearing on a rooftop saying, "Oh, Bruce," or whatever, "Batman, I'm coming for you." Turns out that mystery woman, as we see in the first pages of this issue, is actually the love interest that Bruce had in Detective Comics number 0, who turned out to be like an assassin who was just using him. And we see flashbacks to that of Bruce kicking her butt and seemingly killing her. But then the narration over the top says but I did not actually die. I slowed my heart down to appear that I was dead. And then when he left, I retreated into the shadows. And we see her speaking to some shadowy figure saying "Oh yes, I killed the sensei, as was my job." And the shadowy figure's like, "Yeah, but you kind of sucked at it. You did a really bad job." And he's like, "Well, I kind of am into Bruce." And he's like, "Okay, well, regardless, forget your old identity, forget everything about yourself. You're one of my assassins now, and you must learn all there is to know about Shadow, and then you will be ready." So, cut to present-day Gotham, and there's a van full of mercenaries and hitmen or whatever are screaming down the road trying to get to Wayne Tower, and Batman just gets in the way, lays down some spike traps, and then it just says 2 minutes later, and he's beating the crap out of all of them and taking them all out. And Alfred gives the back and forth with Bruce saying "Oh, as you know, Master Wayne, the Prime Minister of Bhutan is here tonight. That's why all these guys are after him." And Bruce is like, "Yeah, but that seemed a little too easy. I think that maybe that was a distraction. Keep an eye on the tower, though, because I think something might be going on there." And we see back at Wayne Tower, Shadow Lady. I'm going to call her Shadow. It's Mio, technically, but I don't think she gets a superhero name. So Shadow's there looking up at Wayne Tower, And then we see the actual focal point of our story, which is Harper Row and her brother. And turns out that Harper is doing the lighting for this event. She's the one who is setting up all the spotlights or whatnot because she is trying to get into Bruce Wayne's good graces because of the events of, I think it was like Batman, like 18, I think. The one where she tried to help Batman after Robin died. And he told her, like, stay out of this life. You ain't cut out for it. So then we see that Harper's keeping her eye on the Shadow Lady and sees her sneaking her way into Wayne Tower. So Harper's like, oh, I got to go check on this. This is important. So she follows her up to one of the windows where Shadow Lady is cutting a hole, and out of shadow magic makes a crossbow. And Harper's like, uh-oh, that's not good. So then Batman gets a call from Alfred saying, hey, there's an assailant up on the 50th floor of Wayne Tower, and also Harper Row is there. And Batman's like, ah, crap, not her again. All right, whatever, I'll be there in a second. And we see that Shadow has already seen Harper and is about to kill her. And so Alfred's like, sir, you might want to get there a bit faster. Like, how long is it going to be? And he's like, I'll be there very shortly. And he crashes his bat jet into the side of the tower, hops out and is like, you all right, Harper? And he's like, yeah, I think Bruce Wayne might kill me for all of this, though. And it's like, I'm sure he's a cool enough dude. So at that point, he tells Harper, get out of here. I'll deal with the assailant. You tell the police what's going on. So Harper runs down and says, yeah, no, she's doing stuff. She's got all this weaponry and whatnot that's made out of shadows. And then Harper goes, wait a minute. It's made out of shadows. So then Batman is, her name is Penumbra. My mistake. Such a memorable name. How could I have possibly forgotten Penumbra? So Batman's fighting against Penumbra, and he's like, you seem really familiar. Where do I know you from? And he's like, you do not know me. No one knows Penumbra. I am a shadow. I am a thief, blah, blah, blah. And at that point, Harper, down on the ground, angles up one of the spotlights into the floor where Penumbra is, thus negating the shadow weapons, because of course it does. And at that point, Batman gets a good look at her face, sees that it's Mio, and he's like, you're alive? Mio, what's going on? And she's like, what? Hold on. You shouldn't know my real name. What's going on here? And she's so taken aback by the fact that Batman knows her and also is trying to reach out to her, you're not a killer. You don't have to do this. That she falls off of Wayne Tower, but seemingly disappears before she hits the ground. And he's like, well, all right, that happened. So Batman goes down, talk to the police. Then he sees Harper and it's just like, Harper, I told you to stay out of this. What is your problem? He's just like, I was just doing my job. I'm in charge of lighting. And Batman's like, fine. And he reaches behind him and pulls out all of Harper's gear that he apparently confiscated the last time that they met up. And he's like, if you're gonna be out there, at least have your gear. Maybe that will help you not get killed. But seriously, just don't do anything stupid. And Harper smiles up and is like, yeah, sure, whatever. So sometime later, we see Bruce is back at Wayne Manor talking to Alfred. And Alfred's like, she's a bit stubborn. And maybe that reminds you of Damien? And he's like, yeah, that's what I'm afraid of. But then the final thing is that Penumbra showed back up in front of this mysterious shadowy figure. And he's like, you failed. You failed in your mission. Get out of here. We're putting you in the jail cells. And Penumbra's like, no, you need me. I'm a super important assassin. And the shadowy figure, who I'm just going to tell you right now is almost definitely Ra's al Ghul, is like, need you. Assassins are the one thing I'll never be lacking in. And that's it. That's the issue. I mean, sure. I expected this as soon as they introduced Penumbra at the end of the last issue. I expected it to be this big long thing of oh, this is the next arc's villain. But no, just one and done, and we're not it's not even a thing. I appreciate the fact that they brought back Mio. I didn't expect that to ever actually matter. It seemed like it was just origin story and then gone, but it works. It's an okay enough story. I think it does more for Harper than it does the villain. And that's clearly the focus. I don't think that was ever up for debate. But Yeah, I don't know. It's just a fine little single story. If I thought that this book was going to be the thing that develops Harper into like a primary cast member or like something that's going to help with the Damien death thing, then I would be more up for it. But I know that Scott Snyder's the one who's developing Harper whenever that happens over in main Batman, and then Batman and Robin's the one that's handling Robin's death. So this issue kind of just feels like, oh, okay, we're just kind of straddling the line of the other two books rather than being its own identity, you know? So yeah, that's that. Overall, art's okay. Not Scott Eaton's not my favorite artist here. Something about the faces. I'll give it like a I'll give it a 6. A 6 is fair. I like the dialogue. It's snappy. It's just a one shot. It's just a super simple. All right, you're in, you're out, and you don't need to know anything before or after. And it seems like it's setting up a Ra's al Ghul storyline, which I'm totally down for. So yeah, 6 for this. Batwing number 21, written by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti, art by Eduardo Pansica. So last issue, Batwing was sent to Africa to fight against a thing called the Marabunta, which is like a gang that are all based on ants. And then he ran into a godlike lion centaur. So that was a thing. And he got his ass handed to him as well. So this issue picks up with him continuing to get his ass handed to him. And then he's like, all right, time to try something new. And he electrifies Lion Mane, who's the name of the lion centaur guy, and starts throwing some punches. He's like, just give up, Lion Mane. And Lion Mane's like, dude, I am literally a god. And he gives his mild backstory of how he was a normal guy who was transformed because of some weird ritual thing, blah, blah, blah. He's a big lion dude now. And then while he's monologuing, Batwing takes some pepper spray, but like extremely hot pepper spray, and sprays it into Lion's Mane's mouth and also blinds him a little bit, which he thinks is going to be enough to take him down. But then Lion Mane like uppercuts him clear across the cave he's on. And Batwing's like, oh, okay, well, I need to take him out now then. This kind of just dodging and parrying thing isn't working out. So he pulls out this extra little thing and says, time to try something different. And then Lion Mane just throws mud in his face, and that's enough for it to completely be worthless. Like he loses it in the mud. So Lion Mane is throwing him around the room a bit more, throwing him into walls and such like that. And Batwing's just like, okay, I am in serious pain right now. I need to find some way to beat him. And he throws some batarangs, to which they kind of just frustrate Lion Mane and make him angrier. So now he's just roaring and growling instead of making words. And he basically gets Batwing down to the ground. And Batwing's like, I can feel my ribs cracking. I am not okay. And at that point, he starts laughing. And Lion Mane's like, why? What possible reason could you have to laugh right now? And Batwing says, my ride is here. And then the Batmobile just busts in through the cave wall and pins Lion Maiden to it. And that's it. That's the fight. That's the whole thing. And Batwing's like, hey, Batman, I thought I switched off my relays. And Batman's like, you can't just, like, hide from me. I'm Batman, and you're part of Batman Incorporated. Anyway, the cops are on their way. You got 10 minutes to clear out and let them take care of Lion Mane. And he's like, okay, well, what about the miners and everything else about this mine? He's like, don't worry about it. Wayne Industries is going to like buy the whole thing dirt cheap after this crime comes out. It's like, okay, well, that's fair enough. So then he makes his way back home to Gotham, and it's 1 week later. He's recovering from his injuries when all of a sudden this woman named Xena busts in through the door, and he's like, oh my god, Luke Fox, you are actually still alive. Why haven't you called me? And it's a whole big thing that lasts like 3 pages, but the biggest thing is that this is his girlfriend. He has not called her, and she's breaking up with him because she's so much better than that. Like, she is the type of girl who's like, oh no, you're gonna take me out if I'm actually worth something to you. And so he runs out the door and says like, wait, hold on, I want to make this right. And she's like, all right, well, show me that you can. And she drives off, and he's like, ow, my ribs. So thousands of miles away, Layman is being transported by Interpol, and then all of a sudden the plane is attacked by the Marabunta in their giant ant jet, and they break into it and they say, "Hey, Layman, here's the thing. You lost us that mine, which, whatever, like, it was pretty useful for funding, but we didn't really need it. However, you know a bunch of our secrets, so we're gonna kill you." And he's like, "You can't kill me. I'm a god." And he's like, "Okay, well, Batwing took you down, so how much of a god could you really be?" And at that point, he bites off the arm of the guy who's going to shoot him and then just proceeds to kill everyone else on board the plane. And then he leaps off the plane and says, "I'm going to kill Batwing." And you'd think that'd be the end, but no. We have like several more pages in the home of Lucius Fox 2 days later. He's arguing with his sister, Tamara? Tammy? They just say Tam, so I'm going to say Tammy for now. He's arguing with his sister because his sister's like, "Oh, you need to read a book and not be such a jock." And he's like, "Oh, I can make my own money." And then at that point, Lucius' wife and daughter come home. And I do want to point out that the daughter is 7 years old and is apparently a like child prodigy with an IQ of 190. And she's the one who says this, and it feels so on the nose. But regardless, Luke and Lucius are not talking to each other because Luke, bailed out on college and whatnot. He took a break year. So finally, later on in the night, they're in the dad's office. They're kind of making small talk when Lucius asks, "Hey, are you ready to get serious now?" And then his phone rings. Luke's does. It's Batman. He's telling him, "Hey, the Marabunta are in Gotham. They're probably after you. Keep an eye out." And as he looks out the window, there's just a whole bunch of Marabunta swarming all over Lucius Fox's house. That's the issue. So, I guess my main issue I had is, why did we go back to Africa for that one single, adventure? I thought either A, they were going to keep Luke in Africa for a while, and because he said he needed an entire year off, it would make sense that, okay, he spends an entire year in Africa and he's spending time there. But instead it's this one thing, he gets his ass handed to him, and he goes back to Gotham. And yes, he brought the threat with him back to Gotham, but he could have brought the threat back to him if he went to LA as well. I'm trying to figure out why we needed that little branching period of still being in Africa. It just seemed weird to me. Beyond that, it's fine. It's okay. If we're setting up Layman as the main threat of this arc, or the Marabunta, I'm okay with either of them. They've done a good job of developing those characters. I guess my main concern now is, it seems like the Fox family, is going to be the supporting cast, whether or not they actually know he's Batwing or not. But I'm not getting enough of that, to the fact where there's 5 people at this table. I know Lucius and I know Luke. And I know that the older daughter's name is Tam. But I don't know what that's short for. I don't know the name of the younger daughter. I don't know the name of the wife. If they're going to develop this cast, I want them to do it sooner rather than later, so I'm not forced to sit here and be like, "Oh yeah, the mom." Tell me who these people are. Let me get to know them. So overall, art's fine. Not fantastic. The cover is superior than anything else that's in the issue. So I'll give this one I'll give it just a 6.5. It's okay. It's not great. I think that the opening fight scene took a bit too long, and it just feels like this issue's kind of a lot of nothing, but it's not bad nothing, so 6.5. Action Comics number 21, written by Tony S. Daniel and Andy Diggle, art by Tony S. Daniel. So, last issue, we had this whole thing of a hybrid Kryptonian virus thing that Clark fell down into a sewer fighting against, and then Lex Luthor was going to show up and fight Superman for it. This issue picks up reminding us, thankfully, that this is all set 1 year ago, which I had completely forgotten about. But regardless, Lois and Jimmy are pretty much at ground zero. They're like, "Hey, let's go down where Superman was and get the scoop. And Jimmy's like, that sounds like a horrible idea, but I guess I'm in. So we see Superman fighting against the hybrid creature. And he's like, okay, what did I learn last issue? It doesn't like red sun, and it also needs to breathe. So I will just throw it down into the sewer and drown it. And so he does so. He gets it underneath the water, and it starts withdrawing away from him. And when he comes back up, he sees Lois, who is starting to turn into the hybrid as well, and she's screaming out for help. And then he's like, well, now hold on. You're just a hallucination. You're not real. And then all of a sudden, Dr. Veritas shows up in front of him as a hologram, and he's like, are you real? I'm a bit confused now. She's like, yeah, no, I'm a hologram. Anyway, sounds like this version of the hybrid monster is significantly stronger than the one you fought down in my base. I'm going to teleport a red sun thing up there in order to zap it away. You get out of here. And he's like, nuh-uh, I'm going to stay and see this to the end. And it's like, okay, but that thing's good. Like, I'm red sun. Are you clear on that? And he's like, oh, but what happens to the people that were turned? Like, I have to be there for them. And Veritas is like, okay, well, you're kind of going in and out. You're getting a bit choppy. The signal's going out. I don't know what's up. And then we see the thing that was blocking the signal is actually Lex Luthor in his power suit. Mind you, we can't actually see that it's Lex. The power suit is just a complete suit. So he comes in, he attacks Superman. The red sun is turned on, and he's like, you've brought danger to all these innocent people because of you, Superman. So I'm here to take you out to save these people. Lois and Jimmy are hearing all the fighting going on. They make their way deeper into the sewers. We see the power suit is beating the crap out of Superman because he is being weakened by the red sun. And he's like, geez, man, I expect you to put up more of a fight than this, but regardless, I can easily cut you in half with this magic force field blade thing. And Superman's like, who are you, man? I don't even know what's going on here. And he boasts. He's like, oh, I am the foot that squashes the venomous spider. I am the water that extinguishes the flame. And Superman uses his X-ray vision. He's like, oh, okay, you're Lex Luthor. Sorry, I should have gotten that earlier. And Lois hears him say that it's Lex Luthor. And turns out, during all this, the red sun has managed to turn the people back into normal people. And he tells them, get out of here, run away, this fight's dangerous. And Lex is like, dude, they're infected, man. You're just letting them go back up to the surface? You're going to doom everybody. And he's like, no, they're cool. We'll quarantine them and we'll make sure they're cured. And at this point, Lex is like, you are an idiot. You can't cure them because I'm the one who made the virus. And I made it so that there's no cure. And so Superman's like, okay, well, that's an issue. I need to get him away from these people now. So he starts knocking him further down to the tunnels, away from the red sun. And Lex gives chase, and he's like, all right, Superman, where are you? And Superman blasts him with his heat vision. They start to get into just a balls-out fight, and Lois has apparently been capturing all this on her phone, including Lex saying, I'm the one who created the virus. So at that point, Lex activates his jetpack. Superman grabs hold because he can't fly yet. Once they get up out of the sewers, Superman rips off the jetpack, so Lex is stuck just sitting there. And then he uses the jetpack to go all the way to the sun so that he can very quickly get supercharged. And so he does. Mind you, that is going to take at least 10 minutes, but he does it anyway. So then once he has his power, he goes back down to Earth. And he just super speed punches Lex Luthor in the face, somehow not killing him, but regardless knocking him out. And everyone's gathered around like, did Superman just punch out Lex Luthor? Isn't Lex Luthor a billionaire philanthropist? Is that okay? What's going on around here? And Superman, he hears all of them talking and how they fear him or whatnot. And then he hears Lois's voice saying nah, this is all Lex's fault. He's the reason for all. I got him here on my phone. And then he flies away. So then we cut to the next afternoon where Jimmy is recounting to Clark, oh man, you should have been there. It was so cool. Superman beating up Lex Luthor. And Lois stops in and is just like, yeah, no, I've accused Lex of this stuff, but my phone got dropped into the reservoir and I don't have the video proof anymore. It's just my word against his. And Clark says, oh, you mean this phone? As he pulls it out. And she's like, how in the world could you possibly have that? And he's like, I went magnet fishing or something. Either way, here's your phone. And she seems super ecstatic about that. She gives him a big hug. And then at that moment, we see John Carroll, who we've already established is Lois Lane's new boyfriend, walks into the diner where they all are. And Jimmy's like, hey, man, welcome to the friend zone. Clark's like, oh, I'm not interested in her like that. We're just friends. And he's like, yeah, okay. You're only human, Clark. And that's the issue. So it seems like the entire point of this hybrid story was to explain why Lex Luthor was in super prison over in Superman. And if that's the case, like, yes, I'm happy we got an explanation finally. But like, part of Lex's head was also scarred from what seemed to be like severe burns. We didn't get that here. That didn't get explained. All we're getting is why he is in prison. And it's a good enough reason that he, poisoned part of Metropolis. But I also think that Grant Morrison gave a good enough reason of Lex was working with Brainiac way back in like issue 4 or 5. I think that's a good enough reason to be locked up for life. Maybe that's just me, but regardless, it's an okay story. But again, like by the time we get to this issue, we lose the hybrid stuff and it just becomes about Lex Luthor, which I didn't really feel like this arc was about Lex Luthor. He was just kind of around, but then all of a sudden it just, oh, nope, he's actually the mastermind here. Which we knew he was the mastermind, but the fact that he just came out and said it, I don't know, it felt weird. So yeah, it's a very confusing arc. It's not the best foot forward for the new writers. I'm not opposed to it. The other issue I have here is the fact that we're dealing with like hallucination stuff, which is also happening over in Superman with Hector Hammond. So I'm like doubly confused as to what book is which every time I'm reading this now. I just wish they would. That's an editor problem where they just completely differentiate the two books into two very different storylines. But something tells me we're going to stay very tight-knit together. So I'll give this one a... I do like the art. The art looks really good throughout. I have nothing against Tony S. Daniels' art. So I'll say a 6.5. But a lot of that is art. If this were crap art as well, this would easily be down to like a 4 or so. Because the writing is just, it's not there for me. Green Lantern number 21, written by Robert Venditti, art by Billy Tan. This is the first issue post Jeff Johns. And where do we go? Where could we possibly go after such an epic saga? Well, we pick up in the near future with John Stewart, Hal Jordan, and a couple of recruits are fighting against something that has been attacking Oa. And he's like, okay, all you new recruits, tell me how much charge is in your rings. And they're like, how do we do that, sir? And she's like, just ask your ring. And everyone chimes off. They've all got less than like 25%. One of the recruits is killed and his ring goes flying off. And Hal's like, okay, no one else is allowed to die. Everybody get your batteries. We're going to charge up. And John points out that all the batteries are completely empty. And it's like, okay, how do we handle this? And Salak is there, and he turns to Salak and is just like, how do we do this? And he's like, well, you got to go back to the main power battery. That's your only chance. It's like, okay, everyone make a run for it. So they all start running. Explosions are going off behind them. And as they make their way up to the central power battery, we see that the central battery itself is completely dead. So that's a thing. But we don't get there yet. So now we go back to now. Coast City on Earth. And we see Hal comes up to Carol Ferris in her office. And I was like, hey, ready to be your test pilot again. She's like, you pretty much are not a test pilot because you haven't flown a plane in like forever. So yeah, no. Also, I'm not even sure you're like my boyfriend right now because you like have barely shown up. And he's like, oh, well, I mean, I'm here now. I can go ahead and prove that I'm your boyfriend. He's like, yeah, no, hold on. And then we get basically just a page of Carol saying, here's the thing. I love you, and I am a star sapphire, and I can prove I love you because I can turn into a star sapphire. Like, that's not up for debate here. What is up for debate is, like, you and I are not good together because, like, you're not around when I need you. You know, you are not grown up enough. You're not ready for like a real relationship. Like, you're still on your brother's couch and all that. And basically she's saying, like, yeah, we need to break up because I have given you chance after chance after chance and you just keep on throwing them away. So right now, let's just take some time apart and just do our own things. And Hal's gets a call over his ring. It's just like, okay, I got to go take care of this, but like, I'll give you your space, I guess. And so he flies away and says, we will work things out. So back on Oa, we see Kyle is up training the new Guardians. And I know his book is called The New Guardians, but these are actually like the tiny little blue people that were locked in that box for all of Wrath of the First Lantern. They're looking through a bunch of weaponry stuff, and Kyle's like, maybe you should not touch that without knowing what it is. And one of them goes off, and he's like, oh yeah, that was great, fantastic. So then Hal shows up, and he's like, hey guys, you called. By the way, I've already got my scolding for the day, so please don't do that. And he's like, no, actually, we're putting you in charge of the Green Lanterns. And both Kyle and Hal are like, I'm sorry, what? You're doing now? Not a good idea. Both Hal and Kyle are saying this. Like, he is not the like leadership kind of guy. He's like the maverick that goes off and does his own thing. And Kyle's like, oh yeah, no, this guy, he is awful. Like, you do not want him in charge at all. But they point out, it's like, look, here's the thing. Salak has resigned from his position of like protocol. Right now we've got Kilowog in there instead. And we're going to go off and we need to just understand the world. We need to understand the universe that has changed since we've been locked in our box. So we're going to go do that. And then when we get back, we'll take over the core. But the rebuilding period, because so many Lanterns have died, is on you. You are the one who's going to rebuild the core, Hal Jordan. Good luck. And so he's flying off and they say, oh, by the way, Kyle, stay back because we got to talk about your book. So Hal flies off to Kilowog and he's like, yeah, I was told I need to rebuild the core, Kilowog. What do you think? He's like, I think that we need to take this one step at a time. We have all of these dead Lanterns rings kind of in stasis right now. Let's just take it one step at a time and we'll figure out how we want to handle this. And Hal's like, that's a good idea. Beep. All rings released. And Kilowog's like, dude, why do you even ask my advice? And all the rings go out flying. And he's like, yeah, look, we're going to get some replacements. We're going to get some new trainees. And then we can just like start things up. May as well do it now because you never know when the next bad thing is going to happen. So let's make sure they're all trained. And then as he looks out to the stars, he sees a sea of orange headed their way. Turns out it's Larfleeze and his entire Orange Lantern Corps. And they're like, crap. So Hal and Kilowog start fighting back as best they can. They call up any available lanterns to help in the fight. We see a bunch of lanterns down protecting the prisoners in the science cells. And as they start to charge up their rings, all of their power batteries just go kaput. They all just flash out. And it's like, okay, well, maybe Larfleeze messed with our batteries. I don't know. Regardless, our rings are at 100% now. Let's go fight. And one of them named Cossite stays behind to watch over the prisoners. And specifically one of them named Null Ange that he seemingly is in love with. Mentioning it in case it comes up later. Regardless, the fight between the Orange Lantern goes on. And they're barely holding their own. They're like just slightly staying on top of things. We see that the Green Light is able to beat the Orange Lanterns. And Larfleeze seems surprised by that, but I'm unaware of that rule. If Green isn't supposed to beat Orange, I'm very surprised by that. But regardless, he is doing his best to fight against. And then he's like, oh, don't worry about it. The newest, like the recruits from the closest sectors, they should be showing up any minute now. And I'm sure they're going to be able to kick some ass. And he hears a voice from behind them saying, can someone help us take these rings off? And we see that it is the equivalent of like 4 teenagers have just shown up and they're like, we just want to go home. And that's where the issue leaves off. I like it. I mean, it's hard to follow up something as big and grand as Jeff Johns' saga. No matter what you do, it's going to be compared. I think that this is the good next step. Like, yes, a bunch of lanterns died. We need to replace them. We need to get new lanterns in. And doing the police academy style of things, of just training these kids to be competent, there's a story there that isn't often able to be explored. That being said, it might be better explored in Green Lantern Corps rather than the main book, but I don't know what Green Lantern Corps is going to be doing post Jeff Johns, so if this is how they want to handle this one, I'm cool with it. I think it's an interesting enough idea. I do question the start of this, that little flash forward of, oh, but the central power battery's dead. I don't know. It seems like it's too big of a thing too quick. I kind of want them to, after something as big as Wrath of the First Lantern, I kind of wish they would have just kept it really small scale to start. Yeah, you can fight Larfleeze and all that, but if we're going to go something as big as like the light of the Lantern Corps has gone out, I would rather wait for that. I think that's something that you do after like 2 arcs worth. You know, start small, train these newbies, and then we'll deal with that. So who knows? Maybe they will do that. Maybe it's an extreme flash forward, but it feels to me like this is going to be something we're going to deal with in like 2 issues time. So I'll give this one I'll give it a 7 point. No, I'll give it a 7. It doesn't feel right to give it the 0.5 yet. It has promise, but it's just not quite there. So I'm looking forward to next issue at the very least. Earth 2, number 13, written by James Robinson, art by Yildiray Cinar. So last issue, there was a lot going on last issue. It was a whole thing of introducing Batman, and the Atom had like a thing. This issue picks up on the storyline established there, though, where they want to send Captain Steel into a fire pit outside of Rio de Janeiro. And we open up with Captain Steel arriving, and he's like, yes, I'm here. What can I do? And then we see, what's his name? Singh, I believe? Khan? I don't know. The main general dude. Commander Khan, that's it. It has to explain to his superiors and the readers what the hell is a Captain Steel. So he goes out and he's like, okay, here's the thing. We know we're going to war with Steppenwolf. He's here on Earth and he's made himself a ruler of a country. That's going to happen in like 48 hours. So what we want to do is take the first 24 hours and we're going to send Captain Steel into this fire pit. And the fire pits were made by Terry Sloan during the war because he's a dick. And all of them are deadly, and you have to live really far away from them, except for the one next to Rio. And so they figure, hey, we don't know much about these fire pits. Let's send in somebody to do some recon with the only safe one. So they are sending in Captain Steel inside of this weapon that was apparently built during the war. It was called the Red Files, where they had a bunch of them. One of them called Red Tornado, one of them called Red Arrow. This ship is called the Red Torpedo, and he's going to take it in there and drive it down. And then we get the backstory of Captain Steel, who he is as a person. He was an orphan. He was adopted by a father. He had a disease that would have made his bones crumble into nothing by the time he hit adulthood. And so his adoptive father did a bunch of tests on him and basically turned his bones and organs to steel, which gave him enhanced strength. And also he can control machinery to some extent. So that's the reason that he's the one going in, is that even if the fire pit has something that disables Red Torpedo as a ship, he can still keep it moving and get out of there. So the superiors are like, all right, yep, sounds good. Send him in and make sure he's out by the time we have to fight with Steppenwolf. And so Captain Steel's talking to this guy who like made the Red Torpedo, and he's like, yeah, here's the thing, guy. You're coming up to me all fanboy or whatever. I don't care. And he's not doing it as like a dick sort of thing. He's just like, I do this because it's my job. Like, It's not that I don't appreciate the like fan thing, but like I'm not doing this out of excitement. I'm doing it because nothing else matters to me. And he just gets in the ship and goes down. So then we get the B plot, which is Hawk Girl, and she is fighting against some, as best I can describe them, hitmen, maybe, that are riding enlarged versions of the rats that come from Apocalypse, and they've been genetically modified to be rideable. And she's fighting up against them because she's trying to investigate what happened to Green Lantern's boyfriend that caused him to die. Because if you remember, like 3 issues ago, they established that it wasn't them coming after Alan Scott, it was them coming after the boyfriend. So she's fighting against them. She loses track of one of them that sneaks up on her, and then we see a batarang bomb is thrown into his neck, which causes him to explode. And Hawkgirl's like, "Who the hell is that?" She looks over, she sees Batman in a tree, and Batman's like, "Keep going. The Kanto from Apocalypse. He's the one behind all this." And then Batman just disappears into like a red mist. And so Hawkgirl's like, "Okay, so I think I just saw the ghost of Batman. That was weird. Regardless, what in the world is Apocalypse got to do with Alan's boyfriend?" So that's the mystery coming up. Meanwhile, 35 hours later, Commander Khan finally hears back from Captain Steel, and he's screaming out, just like, "There's something emerging, there's something going on." And turns out that Captain Steel has literally crawled his way out of this pit. The red torpedoes just failed. He's crawling his way out, and he's saying, "Seal it off! Get it closed! There's someone inside, and she is unstoppable." And we see Captain Steel as he gets out of the pit. His flesh has mostly like melted off. Is missing an entire arm, it appears. And he says, "The Red Lantern, we have to save the world from her, protect the Earth, because if she ever gets out, our planet dies." So we got a Red Lantern. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I'm interested. It sounds interesting, but it's so weird, the fact that this is a parallel Earth, because all of these familiar things, you hear the Flash, you hear Green Lantern, you even think Batman, they aren't the same. And they aren't the same in major substantial ways, even down to how their powers work. There's some similarity there, but it's not the same. So when Captain Steel comes out and says Red Lantern, first off, they already established in this issue that there is a red files with like red torpedo and red arrow. So it sounds like it could be something to do with that. But then it's also in an apocalypse fire pit. So who knows? It could be anything. I'm intrigued though. I'm interested. It's a good mystery, is this one. The last arc was very much just like action all the time. Well, that was the Dr. Fate one. I'm talking about the first arc was very action immediately. Not a lot of mystery to it. Dr. Fate one was just getting more characters. This one is getting down into, okay, we've got the characters out. Now we're playing with the conflict. We've got all, Mr. Miracle, Barda, Steppenwolf, they've all got their allegiances, and then we've got our own little Justice Society here. I'm interested to see how these conflicts play out with this new mystery coming into play. So I'm going to give this one... I unfortunately still need to give it like a 6.5, but that's only because all of this with exposition. Only the very last page is really anything worth writing home about in the big reveal. Everything else was just text box of like, well, as you know, Captain Steel is blah, blah, blah. Too much, should have been more naturalistic, as best they really could have. So I got to give this one a 6.5. Green Arrow number 21, written by Jeff Lemire, art by Andrea Sorrentino. So last issue, Oliver started making his quest out to the Black Mesa, Arizona, and when he got out there, he got knocked out by one of Magis's guys. This issue picks up with him being taken out of the trunk, and it's like, all right, time to wake up, you got a trip ahead of you. And he sets him down in the desert, and then we see him make his quest through the desert that we've seen for the past, 4 issues. He finally arrives where Magis is, and he gets his arrow, and he's like, all right, Magus, you're going to tell me what's up. I need the backstory. And he's like, yeah, no, totally. You've reached this far. Let's get to it. And he offers him a drink, and he, of course, takes it. And as he takes the drink, he's like, oh, wait a minute. You drugged that, didn't you? And he's like, yeah, I did. But it's okay. It's important to you discovering the origin story here. And he starts fading into this super crazy looking, like just trippy sequence. And as he comes to, he sees the island. He sees it again, but this time all of his previous villains, and I mean that in terms of like from like the Innocenti run and stuff like that. His villains are there, and they look great in Sorrentino style. And it's just like, oh no, all of my enemies, but like I don't see Komodo. Why is that? And he starts getting attacked by the villains. And then all of a sudden he's pushed through the ground and ends up seeing his father, Emerson, and the guy who will be Komodo named Simon. And he's looking at them like upside down, but they're basically his dad saying like, all right, look, the map says it's nearby. We should set up camp here for the night, and then we'll figure out where it is tomorrow. And him and Emerson are arguing like, the map is a fake. You shouldn't be looking for this. You have a company back home. And Ollie's dad is like, no, like all of the journals and maps I found point to this island as the home of the Arrow clan. And it shows that the outsiders have been here recently as well. And Emerson's like, dude, I'm not okay with this. Like, this is a fool's errand. We should be at home. Like, your family is there. Don't you think they are worried about you? And Magus shows up behind Green Arrow. He's like, what are you seeing? Like, you're the only one who's seeing whatever's going on here. What's going on? And he's just like, I don't know. My dad's saying something about, like, the outsiders and the Arrow clan. What's going on with that? And he's like, yeah, no, the outsiders. I was actually an outsider for, like, centuries ago. And it's like, centuries? It's like, yeah, okay. Pay attention. There are 7 clans. Arrow, Spear, Fist, Shield, Sword, Axe, and then one that's going to be a secret later. Your dad discovered that your great-great-grandfather was once head of the Arrow clan. And to become head of the Arrow clan, you need this ancient totem weapon. And so I was like, okay, so my dad's here looking for an ancient arrow. That's it. And it's like, no. The totems are not just artifacts. Like, whoever picks them up gains true enlightenment. And that's what it means to be part of the outsiders. And then he zooms over to where Simon LaCroix is. And it's like, yeah, your dad, like, he really liked Simon. Simon was an up-and-comer, and he's totally down on all the things that your dad wanted you to be down on, like archery and Arrow Clan and stuff like that. And so he took Simon under his wing and, like, raised him to be his protege because you were being a big disappointment. And they say, like, yeah, and then LaCroix killed your dad for the Arrow Clan secret. Like, that's the real reason he died. And Ollie's like, no, that's not possible. My dad died on a boating trip or whatever. It's like, yeah, no, rich people can't fake deaths. So then all of a sudden, Ollie, his vision starts warping, and he sees the heads of 3 dragons. And they all go to attack him. And Magus is like, hey, okay, what happened there at the end? That didn't seem like it was part of it. It's like, oh, there were like 3 dragons. They tried to attack me. He's like, 3 of them? Huh, that's weird. Anyway, so he tells him straight up, like, yeah, LaCroix's the one who killed your dad. Emerson knew that he needed to protect you and prepare you because obviously LaCroix was thinking that you might be the one who could replace him. So everything he did, including dumping you on that island with nothing but a bow, that was all Emerson trying to train you. That was like, he was the one who was doing that. And Arrow's finally like, okay, fair enough. Does LaCroix have the arrow now? And he's like, no, he doesn't. He wants to be part of the outsiders, and they're kind of just letting him be because no one currently has the arrow, but he doesn't have the arrow. And it's like, fair enough. I'm going to go kill Komodo then. And Magus points out, like, okay, here's the thing. You saw 3 dragons, which means you're going to need to find those 3 dragons first. So you got some MacGuffins to go after, boy. And he's like, okay, so like Komodo dragon, is that one of them? It's like, no. Well, yes, Komodo's one of them, but like it has nothing to do with that. There's also 2 others, and one of them is someone who knows where Komodo and the Outsiders are hiding. And then Matt just starts walking away, and he's basically like, yeah, here's the thing. We're done. I was strictly here for educational purposes. You're going to need someone who's a better guide, and I got this guy. And the guy who knocked out Ollie in the desert shows up. Turns out he is the leader of the Axe clan. He has the magic axe. And once Ollie fires an arrow, the guy's name is Butcher. He just deflects it away, and then he punches out Ollie for firing an arrow at him. He's like, it was a rubber tip. It just would have knocked you out. That's all. I was like, yeah, it would have just knocked me out. So at that point, Butcher's like, yeah, all right, here's the thing. Like, I hate Simon LaCroix. He's a dick. So anyone willing to take him down, I'm good with it. And Oliver asks about the totem weapon. And he's like, yep, I'm all enlightened and stuff. So they start to go after the second dragon. And Magus says it is in a country called Vlatava. It is in Eastern Europe. It's going to be the biggest test of your life, Green Arrow. You set. And he's like, yeah, man, I'm ready. This is for my father. This is what I've always been built for. So then we go back to Seattle, and Oliver's basically telling Henry and Naomi about the task, and they're both up for it. They're like, yeah, no, we're going. And he's kind of surprised Naomi is, because Naomi was like tortured and stuff, and she's like, you sure you don't want to sit this out? And he's like, no, he tortured me. I totally want to help take him out. Like, that's straight up what I'm in for. So I'm coming for this. So Henry points out the obvious of like, hey, not to be a drag, but like, you don't have Oliver Queen money anymore. Queen Industries is gone. And he's like, yeah, I know. Look, I get a salary from the JLA. That'll have to be enough. But like, we're going to be doing this without trick arrows. We're not going to have the fancy toys anymore. It's just me, a bow, and a set of normal arrows. Let's go. And that's it. That's the issue. I am so down for this. This managed to take all of the craziness that was the first 17 issues of Green Arrow, have it make sense, have it be good, and then just completely push it aside in a way that still felt satisfactory and say, no, here's the real mission. Here's how the true test of Green Arrow is going to start. And it feels so good. And it looks fantastic. And I am so down for all of it. So I really don't have a negative thing to say about this. It is still set up, and it was a lot of exposition here, not a whole lot of getting on with it. But the fact that it's managed to completely reset the board in a way that doesn't feel cheap, it doesn't feel unearned. It feels like they took the time and said, nope, here's how this new plot's going to go. And I love it. I love every aspect of it. So I'm going to say this one is I'm going to say 8.5, but the only thing keeping me from a 9 is the fact that it is pretty much just laying out the rules of here's what you have to do now. It's not forwarding the plot as much as it is explaining the plot, but I loved it. They still did it in a creative way. So realistically an 8.5, but the bottom of my heart really wants to give it a 9. So just do with that what you will. Stormwatch number 21, written by Jim Starlin, art by Yvel, Guichet. So last issue, they were coming down to this planet, seeking out this strong psychic source. Stormwatch got involved in this weird-ass holy war thing. It seems like it won't matter. And then Lobo got recruited by the timeline-changing aliens to help them out. This issue picks up with them seemingly in Lobo's psyche and saying wait a minute, hold on, this guy exists in multi-dimensional realities, but multiple ones of them. That's weird. He should only exist in one. Why is this creature of Lobo so powerful and so strong? Guess we'll find out. So we see after last issue, the Canaanites are protecting Stormwatch from the Bruticus warriors. And Stormwatch is basically like, hey, we're kind of on a stealth mission and we can't have you guys following us around, so we're going to bounce. And Canaanites say, okay, well, we'll give you this little camera thing. And if it sees trouble, then we'll come running for you. And it's like, all right, sure, why not? So at that point, Midnighter says, hey, look, a bar. Let's go to the bar. And they all make their way in, and Jenny is like, excuse me, I am nowhere near old enough to come into this bar. And they're like, we don't care. Don't drink if you don't want to. And we see the psychic alien things have brainwashed a Bruticus soldier to attack Stormwatch again. Lobo wakes up, and Jenny's immediately like, oh, I sense the psychic energy. It's super nearby. And we see Lobo is literally right across the bar from them. And he grabs a bottle of liquor, sits down next to Stormwatch, chugs it all, and then passes out on the table. And everyone's like, oh, hey, that's Lobo. We got files on him. But he's not a psychic. So why is he, like, setting off Jenny's sensors or whatever? And they're like, oh, well, he must be a conduit for the psychic energy. So at that point, Jenny's about to read him because he's totally out at that point. But then, wouldn't you know it, the, whatever it's called, the Bruticus, they show back up to attack Stormwatch again. And then we see the Caymanites as well are being brainwashed by the psychic aliens to also attack Stormwatch. So Hellstrike, who I'm just barely remembering the name of, is reporting back to base. He's like, hey guys, don't worry about it. We'll have these Bruticus soldiers taken down in no time. But then the Caymanites show up as well, and it's like, wait, crap. Okay, we might need some help after all. This is going tits up. So they're all fighting. Lobo comes to his senses and just starts walking away. Jenny and the Weird are like, oh, wait, Lobo's leaving. We need to chase him down. Let's go get him, and then I'll use my powers to read him. And so Weird restrains Lobo only because he's too drunk to really fight back. Jenny looks inside him, and inside his psyche are the aliens. And they introduce themselves as the Collective with a K. And they say, here's the deal. We're just going to explain everything to you, Jenny. We are psychic beings from, like, the future or whatever. We protect the timeline. That's our thing. We see the timeline splitting. If one timeline leads to, like, massive casualties, we roll that timeline back and we go with a different one. And, like, please note, all of this could be lies. Like, they explicitly say, like, oh, yeah, this ploy should be effective. So I don't know what in this is true. But regardless, they're saying, yep. And then sometimes, like, instead of, if we go too far down a timeline and realize we made an error that's just, like, a couple junctures back, we can just erase that whole timeline and go back. That's our power. That's what we can do. And Jenny's like, so you guys are just playing God and toying with everyone's existence. And it's like, yeah, but to save countless deaths. Like, we only do it for that reason. Anyway, here's the thing. Hundreds of thousands have died in this war between the Bruticus and the Caymanites. Lobo was eventually going to come to join one of those sides, no matter which timeline we went down, except for one. And whichever side he had would have not only won the war against the other, but also conquered numerous galaxies. And, like, they all would have had mass genocide because Lobo's just that crazy. And so Jenny's like, okay, so you're going to kill Lobo? It's like, well, we can't quite kill him because he is, like, super powerful for some reason. But we figured out that there is a timeline where Lobo dies, but it requires Lobo to be in this specific location at this specific time. And Jenny says, why don't you just put him there then? It's like, well, we're, like, psychic beings. We don't really have a physical form. We can't just push him there. We need you to push him there. And she's like, okay, why should I help you? If you got, like, how do I know to trust you? And it's like, I can't convince you of that. Like, that's, you're going to have to do your own thing. However, billions will die if you do not help us. And the moment you have to make your decision is when Lobo begins to glow. And so she snaps back to reality, and immediately Lobo starts glowing. And she's like, crap, okay, I thought I'd have more time. I gotta make the choice here. I'm going to save billions of lives. And so she uses a psychic blast or telekinetic or whatever to push Lobo to where he needs to be. And she knows the coordinates innately. We see that contact was reestablished with Stormwatch HQ. The team has managed to take out the Caymanites and the Bruticus, but they are definitely worse for wear. And they're like, wait a minute, hold on, where's Jenny? What's going on with Jenny right now? So she manages to throw Lobo to the location where he needs to be at. The collectives are looking on like, oh, hey, she actually managed to do it. Sweet. So now we can finally launch our master plan. And as Lobo gets to his feet, a huge burst of energy comes out of him. He is like basically Super Saiyan at this point. And Jenny, the rest of Stormwatch show up because they all see the energy burst. And Jenny's like, guys, I think I might have been played. I think this might all have been a ploy to get Lobo more powerful. And at that point, Stormwatch HQ pops in and just like, actually, this may have been my fault. I didn't tell you guys everything like that you needed to know. And as such, we may have all just been played by these time manipulating alien guys. So yeah, well, we can't really do much now. Let's just see what happens, and then we'll deal with it afterwards. And then the collectives say, engaging the timeline ebony, and so begins the final phase of our greatest manipulation. I don't know what the hell's going on, man. Like, I get the gist of it. I get this very broad sense of aliens have manipulated the timeline to get us into this particular thing. For some reason, Lobo is the special, and he is able to do these things, I guess, that even the collective don't understand. But, like, here's the issue when you make it so that your explanation story is also a lie. I don't know what in that is true. I have no idea. Is their name even the collective? I'm calling them that, but it might not be. I don't know how much of that story they gave to Jenny to trust. Clearly, they did not have the best interests of, like, Jenny, at least at heart, and that it's not going to kill Lobo. But, like, how much of the other stuff was true? I guess this was the issue I was finally looking forward to, like, okay, I'm going to finally get a grip on what in the hell Jim Starlin's doing. And because he introduced their origin story as a lie, I still have nothing. So it's continuing. That's the most I can really say is this story has been continuing. I am getting more of a grip on who the characters are in terms of Hellstrike and the Weird, but even then it's tenuous at best. So I'm going to give this one I gotta give it just like a flat 5. Like, it's nothing awful. I'm not upset with the issue, but, like, I'm upset with the fact that I just don't quite... It reminds me of early Legion of Superheroes, where I just never felt like I had a grip on what was going on. And I that doesn't make me feel good when I just don't know what's happening in a book. So, yeah, we'll see where we get eventually. But for now, a 5. The Movement #2, written by Gail Simone, art by Freddie Williams II. So last issue was basically just our introduction, our big bang flash to get it all going. But we did end with 2 police officers being taken by the Movement, which I assume is their group name, into their lair. And that's where we pick up here. Coral City, the 2 police officers are blindfolded and being led by Virtue, the leader of the group. And basically the cops are saying, like, do you know, like, we're cops. Do you honestly think that the cops aren't going to stick out for each other? Like, you're going to have hell raining down upon you. And it's like, yeah, we're not hiding. That's the thing. And she leads them to this central area, takes off their blindfolds, and says, yeah, no, these people, there's tons of people there, and they're all just living. They're not like soldiers. They're just people living their lives. And says, yeah, these people are homeless. All of their shelters were closed by the higher-ups. And, like, we're here to keep them safe because clearly you can't. And it's called the 181. And then she gives this whole thing on, like, it was a factory back before, like, workers' rights. The owners chained up people so that they were forced to work overtime. And then one day there was a landslide and 181 people there died. And that's that. And as they're walking through, we see the girl who was almost assaulted by one of these cops in the first issue, recognizes a cop, comes over, just punches him hard in the face and says, oh, you remember me, big man? How about you give us a peek and then we'll call it even. And he just takes it. He's just like, oh, you honestly think that these hippies are going to keep us from leaving anytime we want? And Virgie's like, no, you're going in the jail cells. And so she has some jail cells. She puts him in there. One of the cops starts pleading, just like, please, we were stupid. We know, like, just let us go. The other cop's pretty stoic, just like, nah, screw you. I'm not playing this game. And he makes the point of, you're keeping us here against our will, just like those workers who died all those years ago. How does that make you any better? And Virtue's like, noted. Anyway, so she goes to leave because apparently Mouse is freaking out and is scaring some of the kids around. We see, I don't even know if she has a name. No, wait, sorry. Vengeance Moth is a girl in a wheelchair, and she comes up to keep watch over the cops. He offers them some fruit snacks. Meanwhile, Mouse, real name Jaden, he's freaking out because his favorite mouse, Trouncer, has died. And Virtue and I think it's not Catharsis. It's the one who's able to make like earthquakes. We'll get to her name eventually. She is trying to calm down Mouse, and Mouse is just not having any of it. He's like, okay, no, I'm not okay. He was my favorite. And then like she says, everything's got to die. It was a circle of life, whatnot. And he's like, I kind of want to eat him. And that's where that just leaves off. So then we go to the captain of the police force, the one from last issue. And he's super pissed off that the movement basically is doing the work of the cops, that he has been basically torn out from that. And he asks one of the other cops, like, why do you want to be a cop, fellow officer? And the officer's like, oh, I wanted to help people. I was like, that's a good answer. So we're going to come back and we're going to bring some firepower and we're going to stop this movement before they're able to do something too dangerous. So then we go down to the War Council, which is just kind of the leaders of the movement. We've got Virtue. I've always blanked on her name. The girl with the like powers to do the earthquakes. God, it's very difficult to remember these new people. Catharsis, who's got wings. We've got Mouse, and we've also got Burden, who's the kid who's like demonic from last issue. He's just shown up and he's got powers, so he's here too. So they basically, number one thing is, what do we do with the cops? Do we let them go? And Virtue's just kind of being in the middle here of, well, no, we shouldn't let them go, but we do need justice. Like, what's going on? Catharsis comes down on, let's beat the ever-loving crap out of them. Burden, he comes up and he's like, guys, I don't really think I should be here. I've possessed by a lord of hell. And Catharsis is just like, yeah, I hate being with all of you like hippy-dippy people. Like, I need to beat the crap out of something. Like, come on. And the girl's name is Tremor. That's it. And Virtue chimes up like, okay, Tremor, what do you have to say? And Tremor's like, look, we need to decide whether we're the kind of people who beat prisoners to make a point. And I don't think that's who we should be. I don't think we should be torturing prisoners. And Catharsis calls out that Tremor is possibly a traitor, that there is someone in their group who's leaking information to the cops. And obviously, like, the Cornea killer, the serial killer from last issue, is stealing the eyes from homeless people. So that's like, they shouldn't be worried about small things like the cops' feelings and whatnot. So at that point, Catharsis storms out and says, oh, I'll find the bastard myself. And she swats away Virtue's hand, and Virtue, like, grows in size, which I guess is her power. But regardless, Catharsis isn't having time for it. She pulls out a sword and is like, whatever, I'm going to take care of this proactively. So she flies off. And we see she flies to the building of James Cannon, who is apparently a land developer who more or less runs the city. He tells the mayor what to do, the city council, and he plies them with tons of money. And Catharsis is basically saying, like, I'm here to stop you. I'm here to put an end to all this, because you are clearly somewhat behind this Cornea killer. So then the rest of the gang is making their way to speak to, quote-unquote, a witch, which I have no idea what they're going on about, but she's apparently got something that they want to know. So when they show up there, they get ambushed, and they're immediately attacked by just a whole bunch of people. We see them all using their powers to take on these group of people until finally we see that they have managed to make their way past, and they make their way to the Weather Witch, also known as Rainmaker. And they think that she has something to do with it because all of the victims have been found in pools of water. So if she's a weather witch and she can make rain, maybe that's what's going on. But anyway, back to Catharsis. She gets jumped by a bunch of James Cannon's like personal security. She starts beating the crap out of him as best she can, but she is eventually overwhelmed and like tased and beaten and stuff like that. And one of them calls out like, "You some kind of a mental patient? You're pulling a sword on cops?" And then Catharsis says, "You idiots, I am a cop." So we've got a bit of duplicity. We've got a bit of like, who can you trust sort of stuff going on. I gotta be honest, I'm a bit confused as to what this book is. I thought in the first issue I had a good grasp on it, that it was, okay, you've got the authority, the people who are like in charge that are failing a specific group within the city, and then this group of the movement has taken it upon themselves to be the defenders, to be the group that's going to look after this ignored subculture. I'm okay with that. I like that idea. But now we're getting into this larger thing of like, okay, we've got this one rich guy who runs the city, down with that. But then you've got this idea of the serial killer is maybe going to be someone within the group, and like this Rainmaker lady. You've got the fact that Catharsis is a cop. I don't think that there's no plan, but I do think that I could have been drip fed this a bit more. They're throwing a lot out all at once before I am fully immersed in these characters, and it's making it confusing for me to even just go through. So I'm a little iffy as it stands now. I love the concept, but it's a bit too much being thrown all out here. I needed maybe just focus for the first arc on this group against the cops or something like that. But I think it's doing too much all at once. So regardless, I'd say that this is probably I don't want to come off as too negative, but it is like a 5.5. And it's just because writing wise it's confusing, and art wise I'm not the biggest fan of Freddie Williams here. I think he does better with more ethereal stuff, and this is supposed to be very street level. So yeah, this is like a 5.5. I want to like it more. I'm looking forward to like when it can get to that point, but this just wasn't it for me. Dial H number 13, written by China Miéville, art by Alberto Ponticelli. So last issue, it was a lot, man, but what we found out was that there's another group of dialers that just showed up to assist against the Fixer and Centipede, and they sent him back to the Fixer's, like, home world something. One of them's Open Window Man. Alright, this issue picks up with graffiti of basically the night that Batman was made, where family's exiting out of theater, guy aims a gun at him, shoots the parent, and the kid's left over. And Open Window Man is watching this, and he's like, oh, this always happens. It happens in every world, another orphan. And we see the kid in the graffiti world is talking to Open Window Man that he can see him through the graffiti world. And we see the kid going through the process of like being in the police station, and like it's all done in graffiti, and Open Window Man's just talking to the graffiti kid, and he's like, oh, I don't know why you can see me, but like you should pay attention. You need to understand how police work. It's going to be important for you in the future. And then this is just, I'm going to do my best, but this is just the explanation issue. So there's tons and tons of realities out there, and like one of them is this one where it's a land of living graffiti, but all of them have heroes in it. And the kid's like, I don't understand what graffiti is, but regardless, like, how come only I can see you? And he's like, oh, like, I don't know, but you're not the only one. And we see down the wall, Roxy and one of the other dialers is talking to the graffiti world's version of the Justice League, basically trying to get in contact with them. But then Graffiti Kid heads back to his manor, and like Open Window Man is just training him in how to become a hero, like Batman style. Like he's giving him the Batman rundown. And we see basically the explanation of who this group is. And their names are Nem, Ijad, Unbled, and Dwan, who are each planning something. We have Yaba, who is training Nelson on how to be like a proper hero. And then we have Roxy is with Banza, who are trying to get the hold of something that belonged to a Captain Random. Turns out Captain Random was a hero in the graffiti world and basically had a dial. And then one day, the Fixer showed up and grabbed Captain Random's dial, but Captain Random grabbed the Fixer, one of the Fixer's dials as well, which was the J dial, which allowed the Fixer to jump between worlds. And so without that, the Fixer is unable to jump normally. He has to use things like the abysses and such, which we have seen him do. Banza and Roxy are trying to get the J dial out of the graffiti world, but they can't figure out a way to do it. So that's that. Meanwhile, we see that the Fixer that killed Captain Random, like they've been fighting the Fixer for years. They sent it back to the world with Centipede, but they realize, oh, that's a mistake because they've been quiet. They've been like silent, and that means they're planning something. So they need to figure out like what to do. And the Graffiti Kid's like, oh, I mean, you think something bad's going to happen, but sometimes they don't happen. And Open Window Man's like, that's what leads to your parents getting shot, kid. That sort of optimism. So at this point, we see the kid goes to sleep, and Open Window Man pulls out a piece of chalk and starts drawing something for him. And then we get more explanation that, okay, so what happened was without a J dial, we have to take the backways between worlds too. However, they have a different way around it because one of them has a G dial, which can summon different gear. So they just keep on summoning gear until they get like a thing that can travel between realities, however well that can work. So at that point, I mean, we keep on seeing the kid training. Just assume he's training Batman style throughout all of this. And Open Window Man's like telling him what to do. We see the gang is trying everything to get the J dial out, but there's like nothing they can even do to do it. And then the kid asks, where did all these dials come from? And he says, it came from the Fixer he doesn't want to break the dials. The dials are already broken. He wants to turn them all the way off. And as to where they came from a place of exile from a lost operator. So at that point, Banza and Open Window Man are the only two who aren't actually dialers. They have nothing to do with a dial. But they were all, I'll get to it in a second, I guess. But they've been traveling throughout places, and they came to a world that had been completely destroyed, and they found a bunch of the Centipede's masks there. So they know Centipede and Fixer are doing something, and they're willing to completely commit genocide in order to do it. So that's a thing. Then we get the backstory on why everyone's in on this. So Yaba came from Earth, just like Roxy and Nelson, found a hero dial in a tree. We have Nem, who found a G dial in some random machinery on his world. We have Ijad, who found a hero dial that is able to copy any other hero dial that's being activated at that moment. We have Dwan, who found an auto dialer that's just keeps on changing, and so he's stuck just changing identities constantly. And we have Unbled, who's a demon from literal hell, and he found a dial that's more broken than most of them, but it still is a hero dial. And turns out that Banza was a dialer as well, and she used a dial that caused her to steal the powers of Boy Chimney, who was the sidekick of Open Window Man. And when she stole his powers, he ended up dying. So she tracked down Open Window Man, begged for apologies, but he's like, I I'm not here to get revenge on you. I want to stop the Fixer from doing that. So they've decided to team up to basically avenge Boy Chimney, more or less. And they've picked up all these other dialers along the way. But it turns out that's his second catastrophe, because his first thing, his origin story to become Open Window Man, was his parents were shot dead in an alley. And one night he was sitting in his room saying, Father, like, give me a sign. What should I become? And rather than a bat, it was just an open window. So he became Open Window Man. So anyway, he looks around the graffiti world and he's like, I don't understand this world at all, because it's all just stone pillars with drawings on them. There's no open windows for me to take advantage of. And the kid's like, oh, but there are 2 windows. And Open Window Man's like, that's it. So he goes over, he talks to Nem, I think, the one with the gear dial, and says, I need you to dial me something. I have an idea on how to get the J dial out. So they dial something until they get a bus, which can open up the windows. And so he opens the window on the bus and then comes out of an open window in the graffiti world, because that's his power. He can travel between any 2 open windows. He grabs the J dial from there and says, we will use it to avenge Captain Random, and then leaves through another open window to come back out through the bus. So now they have the J dial. And the book more or less ends with him drawing an entire bat cave underneath the graffiti kid's manor. And he's just like, oh my God, this is fantastic. But like, no, thank you. It doesn't belong here. Like, this isn't what's meant to be here. Let me figure out what I need to be on my own. And Open Window Man's like, oh yeah, no problem. Like, don't worry about it. I'm very proud of what you've managed to become, Graffiti Kid. And so he wipes the thing clear, waves goodbye to Graffiti Kid, and now they're on their way with the J dial. This is so dense. This is so much to absorb. But like, I love the way the story's told, in that it's all done via graffiti and like some flashbacks, but mostly the graffiti. It's a lot. It's a lot to take in. And I don't know, because I know this book only goes until issue 15. So maybe this was the point where China Miéville was told, like, hey, we're canceling it, wrap it up. And so they weren't, like, maybe this was meant to be spread over a bunch more issues, but I love the way it's told here. So complicated as it may be, introducing a bunch of new topics, it's done fantastically. It's hard for me to express it because it's very much a visual medium, but like, it's good. So yeah, overall, I mean, I'll give this one like an 8.5. It's creative in all the best ways. It manages to exposit without feeling like exposition. It's just a solid issue. So yeah, 8.5. Swamp Thing number 21, written by Charles Soule, art by Jesus Saiz. So last issue, we had Swamp Thing returning to a swamp and seeing a random woman there saying, hey, help me. And this issue picks up, basically Swamp Thing says, like, you know, I don't have to live in a swamp. I could be anywhere. Like, I could be a forest thing. I could be a jungle thing. I choose to be a swamp thing because the swamp is very hostile. Like, there's a lot of life. It's a very huge amount of life going on there, but people tend to stick to like the main riverways. They don't come in very deep. So imagine my surprise when there is just a random woman here saying, save me. And he reaches out to her and just like, I'm sorry, save you from what? And she throws out this Latin phrase of sanctuarium folium viride. And Swamp Thing's like, okay, I barely know any Latin. I just learned it for the plant things. I do love this one line here. It was like, I couldn't imagine a situation where I'd need it. Then again, I set up a 401k. Life's all about curveballs these days. So he stands up and is like, okay, well, I doubt your name is Sanctuarium Folium Viride. So who are you and why are you here? And it's like, oh, my name is, and I'm just going to guess here, Capucine, Capucine. I'm going to say Capucine. So Capucine And I've come to invoke my rights of sanctuary and fully. And he's like, yeah, no, like, I don't know what that means. You're going to have to give me something more to work with. And he's like, okay, but like, I can feel like a little rattling in the back of my head of like the green knows what that means. So maybe I shouldn't say I don't totally know what it means. And she reaches up and plucks off a leaf off his chest and be like, I am here for the sanctuary of the green leaf. I was promised protection and now I need it. And it's like, okay, well, I guess I'm beginning to understand what's going on. And he asks, when was this promise of the green leaf made? She says 800 years ago. And it's like, okay, yeah, of course you're 800. It's weird how I can just take that in stride. But anyway, he's like, all right, look, let me explain. And then Swamp Thing's head explodes. Turns out 2 hunter guys show up and they are here to hunt down Capuchin. And it's like, oh, see, I shot Swamp Yeti. And here to attack Capuchin. And she explains like, yes, I know, you guys have heard the legend of Capuchin. Kill her in close combat and you could take 10 centuries of life for yourself. Yet notice I'm still alive, so how do you even know that legend's true? And she's like, well, better at least try it. And she's like, look, there have been many people trying to hunt me over the years, thousands. You will fail. Just walk away now. And they keep coming. And so Capuchin dives into the swamp and the hunters are like, oh, wow. Maybe that's her thing. Maybe whenever someone comes close, she just runs away. But then Capuchin jumps out of the swamp and throws mud in their eyes and proceeds to beat the crap out of both of them. One of them slices the other's throat accidentally, and so she picks up the sword and goes to stab the second one. Swamp Thing, having reconstituted at this point, uses vines to stop him from getting stabbed. She just cuts through the vines and then stabs him anyway. And Swamp Thing doesn't like that. He makes a cage around Capuchin. He's just like, that guy was disarmed. You didn't have to kill him. And he's like, he was going to kill me. That was literally his entire purpose being here, was to kill me. Also, I thought he killed you. So I feel like I was a bit in the right there. And she's like, fine, look, why do you need my protection if you're able to fight like that? And it's like, I don't need your protection now. I need it for when I'm dead. And again, will you honor your promise? And Swamp Thing's like, I need to go talk to my bosses real quick. Just stay in that cage. And so he goes and talks to the Parliament of Trees. And it's basically like, hey, guys, does anybody know anything about Sanctuary of the Green Leaf? And they're like, yeah, no, one of our coolest old avatars did that. We'll let you see that. So they take him back into the avatar's memory. It was back at like some witch burnings. Some pagans were being burned at the stake. And then all of a sudden the stake itself starts to turn into a tree. And all the people are like, oh, this is sorcery. Kill them quickly. And the Swamp Thing of the era comes out with some like green soldiers. And it's like, I'm not going to let you burn them. What makes you think I'm going to let you stab them? Look, these people invoked sanctuary and blah, blah, blah. They are under my protection. Anybody want to come up and fight me? And all the soldiers just run away except for one of the priests who's like, oh, you devil, I swear that I will have my vengeance on you. I'm not afraid of you. And he's like, dude, you're afraid of everything. And he just picks up these pagans and takes them into the forest. And he turns towards the apparition of current Swamp Thing and it's just like, do you get it now? Do you understand what it is? And it's like, vaguely, but where are we? And it's like, oh, this is France 800 years ago. So like, yeah, it's not exactly your time. But he explains more in depth. These people worship the green. They were persecuted as like witches and stuff like that. Therefore, made a thing where anybody who calls out for sanctuary of the green is able to have it, so long as they are a friend of the green. I want to make clear, you don't have to do this. Every single avatar does things their own way. It's about working within the green to get something out of it for yourself. This is something that I wanted to do, so I did it. You don't have to. But regardless, I am here in the Parliament and I am able to assist you. I'm willing to help you however I can. And then he looks down at his hand, which starts like withering away. And he's like, that's weird. And then his entire body just disappears into ash. And he's like, oh God, oh geez, I can feel it happening to me too. Something killed him and it's going to kill me. Oh my God. And then he's like, wait a minute, hold on. No, I'm in control of the green. I'm just going to push up and get out of this like the Avatar. So he comes out of the green, manages to reconstitute himself before he's completely destroyed. And as he gets out, Capuchin's like, hey, you're back. So are you going to help me or not? And he's like, didn't I leave you in a cage? Okay, look, here's the thing. I'm not the same Swamp Thing. That's not who I am. That sanctuary, it wasn't my promise. It was just someone like me. And Capuchin's like, oh, so you're not going to help me. You're not going to protect. Please, I'm begging you. And he's like, I'm not saying I'm not going to, but like, I need to know why. You got to give me a bit more than that. And she's like, ask me anything. And he's like, all right, I will. Like, trust me, you are second on my to-do list. But number one is this thing that maybe just killed me, like a past version of me. I got to deal with that first. So I'm going to go take care of that. And she's like, okay, but like, please, I'm dying. My time is short and he's coming. So don't take too long. So Swamp Thing disappears. He says, I felt you when you tried to kill me. You're in Scotland, but I'm there too. And I'm pissed off at you. And we see that it's the Cedar, as we established before, Seeder. He is here to somehow use the green for nefarious purposes, but like he made that oasis before and Swamp Thing's aware of him. And he's apparently in Scotland. I liked it. I think it did a good job of setting up this. It's not even like a new concept. Like it's just a thing of one of the Swamp Things said, hey, I will protect you if you like are a friend of the green. And now it's just a future Swamp Thing's having to deal with that. I like that. I think it's a nice concept of playing with this idea that this role of Swamp Thing is not a singular thing. It's a title that passes down. And so you have to deal with what previous people who held the title have done. Also, it's feeling a hell of a lot like Avatar: The Last Airbender, but I consider that a compliment. I think it's a very good way to go with it. Beyond that, Capuchin's an interesting character. I'm interested now more in the Cedar, the fact that he is to some extent malicious or maybe is just accidentally draining the green. There's a lot to explore here, and I'm up for it. It's got me wrapped up in it. So overall, I got to give... Oh, and by the way, writing, like, Swamp Thing is funny. Like, I can't sell the jokes myself, but Charles Soule's version of Swamp Thing is, like, very dry and witty, and I appreciate that. So overall, I'm going to give this one I'm going to give it a solid 8. I really did enjoy it. It's a nice, solid issue. I'm looking forward to seeing how it's going to evolve out of this. So, good work, Charles. Phantom Stranger number 9, written by JMD Matteis, art by Fernando Blanco. So last issue, we basically had the breakdown of the guy who Phantom Stranger stole the life of to become Philip Stark has become a thing called the Sin Eater, and he's the one who kidnapped Phantom Stranger's family. And once Phantom Stranger was brought back to quote-unquote life, he vowed that it's time to take care of this. So this issue opens up in hell. Phantom Stranger is being tortured while Etrigan is sitting there just playing a tune on a harmonica. Sorry, a lute. And Phantom Stranger's just like, I didn't know you were a musician, Etrigan. And he's like, nah, I'm just playing a hell song. It soothes the savage beast, but this song is things from your own soul. And then we see a bunch of vultures over top of Phantom Stranger as he's strung up on this tree. And they all start picking at Stranger, but he's like, well, I chose this. This is on me. I'll just accept my punishment and continue on with my unlife. And all of the vultures start coalescing. And it's like, well, if you're just going to accept the punishment, what's the point of it? This is hell, Stranger. You need to beg for mercy. And as they coalesce, they become the Sin Eater, which Phantom Stranger's basically like, look, you can wait for all of eternity. I'm not going to beg. I'm not going to beg for mercy. Like, this is exactly what I know. I did the right thing here. And he's like, all right, fine, whatever. And in the middle of the torturing, Phantom Stranger flashes back to right where we left off last issue. And Justice League Dark is like, I'm sorry, you know where your family is and who took them? And it's like, yeah, no, totally. But like, he brought them to hell. He consigned them to the pits of hell. I need help from you guys to get there. And it's like, well, you can't exactly just like ring the doorbell and walk in. It's like, right, but you guys are the Justice League Dark. Are you telling me the great Constantine can't help? And I was like, okay, I see what you're doing. But yeah, no, we'll do it. So they spend quite a few days or whatever just like cracking open books and figuring out like how to do it. And then eventually they find a way to send Phantom Stranger into hell. But they don't exactly have an exit plan. That's more or less on him, but they managed to get him in there. He's like, fair enough, thank you. And so he walks into this horrible looking version of himself, and the mouth is open. He walks into the mouth and he says, Zatanna, if you believe in prayer, say one, but not for me, for my family. And the mouth closes shut as he then comes out into hell. And turns out that hell is different for everybody. Obviously, it's based off your own personal things. But even then, the demons there are representative of your own personal sins and demons. And so they start coming after Phantom Stranger. And he's like, luckily, I've spent my entire life dodging my own demons. So he just uses a little bit of like a trickery spell to force the demons to go after each other. And then at that point, Etrigan shows up along with Sin Eater. And he's like, hey, I'm Etrigan. By the way, he's rhyming this entire time. I will not do that. So he's like, hey, I'm Etrigan. Sin Eater here wanted to handle you all by himself, but he's not in charge of hell. So Lucifer sent me to be like the guide, more or less. And so Sin Eater and Phantom Stranger basically start fighting, more or less, because he's like, oh, show me where my family is. And Etrigan's like, okay, enough. Let's take a walk. So they walk their way into this town of Starkville, which is, of course, a representation of some extent of Philip Stark. And he basically says, like, you know, stranger, like, life doesn't have a purpose. And he just gets, like, philosophical for a while of basically, like, I have spent my entire unlife, like, everything after death, planning this, making it so I could take this away from you. So I want you to really appreciate what I've done here. And as they make their way into the torn down, decrepit version of the house that they lived in, he makes his way upstairs and he sees his wife and 2 children, but they are essentially just husks. They are completely empty and devoid. And Stranger basically can't stand to see it. Cut away, real quick, Terrence 13, who stabbed Phantom Stranger through the heart. He's feeling awful about it, the fact that he feels that he killed Phantom Stranger. Question shows up briefly, possibly not even there. And he's like, oh, you think a man like that deserves to live? He's horrible. He's an awful person. And Terrence 13 is like, I still feel really bad about it. So anyway, at the end of that, Sin Eater reveals that what he did to them was not only just like taking away their lives, it's worse than that. He took away their ability to like love or feel love, which is apparently what separates man from beast, more or less, because now they're just horrible, unthinking, strictly instinct creatures, and they have no empathy or feeling of like love towards anyone. So Stranger tries to connect with her, the wife. She just almost bites his lip off, and he's like, no, there must be a way. I can't abandon them here. And basically Sin Eater's like, now this is your fault. Like, if you had just left things alone, if you would let me kill them, they would have been in heaven. But instead, now they're down here in hell. And he's like, you would have murdered them. Alive is better than dead. And it's like, psh, you sure? Does this seem like it's better? So at that point, Etrigan, he turns to Etrigan and says, like, look, you know they don't belong here, but you know that I do. I'm the one who betrayed Jesus Christ. Like, you know I belong. And Etrigan's like, careful, buddy. I have a feeling what you're about to say, but like, it's not something you should say carefully. But he's like, I will take their place. See if that's okay with your boss. I will take the place of these 3, and you can put me in chains. And Etrigan's like, all right, fair enough. And all the demons come together to see this going on. Stranger has to carry out his family on his back, and he's more than willing to do so until finally they reach a lake of fire. The demons take his family away, saying, look, we know you. We know your tricks. We'll only let them go back to being alive when it's proven that you actually mean it, that you're going to stay here forever. And he's like, fair enough, but how do I know that you're telling the truth about letting them free? And Etrigan's like, you can trust me. And he's like, fair enough. I feel like I can actually trust Etrigan. That's weird. So Ferryman comes across a lake of fire. Turns out it's Spectre, but like he doesn't say anything, so Phantom Stranger's not even sure if it actually is Spectre. But regardless, we then cut back to now when Sin Eater's like, okay, here's the thing. I talked to the people in charge of hell, and they agree with me that someone who's down here being punished for a righteous cause isn't really being punished at all. So I've come up with a new punishment, and here's the thing that will let your family finally be taken back to being free. You have to give up your love of them. All of your memories of your family, all of your caring for them, those will be taken away. And only in the fact that you will never know them again will they be free. And he hates this idea, but he's like, swear to me that you'll let them go. And he's like, yeah, no, totally. It's like, all right, yeah, I do it. And he gives up his memory of his loved ones. And that's it. They're free. And at that point, Etrigan points out, Sin Eater has no reason to be here in hell anymore. He sends him away, and he's like, yeah, I'm going back to the land of Non, but don't worry, man. We'll be meeting again soon. Etrigan sets Phantom Stranger free from his torture tree, and as he wakes up, he hears a voice, and he's like, oh, Etrigan, is that you? Turns out, no. It's God in the form of that little dog again. And he's like, look, here's the thing, stranger. I saw what you did, and hell may be okay with you being punished for crimes that you did or did not do, but, like, I saw what you did there, and as such, I intervened. You remember your family again, you're free from being tortured, you have done your penance for that one specific thing. Not for the Jesus Christ thing, I want to make that clear. For the family thing, you've done your penance. And he's like, yeah, no, you've been able to keep your soul and your memories and all that. And so Stranger's like, oh, so they're alive again? Like, they're good? And he's like, well, they're free. They're not alive. Remember, I told you to let them die that night. Like, that was part of my plan. So I've managed to get my plan back on track. I've put them back in heaven. So if you want to go see them, you have to go up to paradise. And we see this staircase coming out of hell, and Phantom Stranger's like, oh, geez, I'm not ready for that. I liked it. It felt a little bit like quick to wrap up. The fact that this is the plot that's been going on since like issue 1, and only now we're getting this sort of like, okay, but now they're free, but now they're up in heaven. So even then, I guess it's not done. But the fact that we got the person who did it in the first place has been taken care of, has been sent back, and like he's no longer in control of the situation. Now it's literally God. I like the pivot there, but I also kind of wish that like this singular story would be wrapped up. I think that the family being in heaven should be the end point. Like, they weren't able to be saved. Phantom Stranger is a tragic character, but like, they're in heaven. They aren't being punished for things that they didn't do. I think it should be left at that. We'll see if that's how next issue goes. But as for this one, it was good. It was solid. I like the idea of Stranger having to sacrifice himself for this. It gives a bit more agency to the character than just this person who stands back and watches these things unfold. So overall, I enjoyed it. I'm going to give it a, I don't know. 8 feels too high, so I'll say 7.5. It is very good. I am enjoying it a lot. I also just enjoy anytime God shows up at that little dog. Like, it just gets a laugh out of me every time. So yeah, 7.5 for this. We'll see what happens next time in heaven. And that's it. That's all the comics that came out from DC Comics this June 5th, 2013. And next week, like I said at the beginning, pretty light. It's only 12 comics, and I am more than grateful for that. So in terms of what I'm looking forward to next week, we've got Katana, we've got Superboy, my mistake. That's the wrong list. That's the other one. In terms of comics I am looking forward to, well, how about I just give you the full list instead? We have Batgirl, Batman, Nightwing, Superboy, Green Lantern Corps, Threshold, Katana, World's Finest, Suicide Squad, Constantine, and Demon Knights. And for anybody watching the video version, you may notice I skipped one. Well, that's for the sake of the audio people. Superman Unchained, which for those of you unfamiliar is a mini-series, quote-unquote. Scott Snyder writing Superman. I gotta admit, I bought this one pretty early on in my collection, and I just never read it. So this is completely blind for me. I've never even heard people talking about Superman Unchained, so maybe it sucks. I don't know, but I'm at least interested to give issue 1 a chance. But anyway, do you have any thoughts on Superman Unchained? Have you read it before? Don't spoil it for me, but do share your thoughts on other things down below in the comments and on Reddit and Discord and Patreon. We got a bunch of different places. Just check out the description. But that's going to do it for me. Thank you very much for watching, listening, however it is you consume this podcast. Be sure to rate 5-star, blah, blah. Do I really need to go through this ending? Like, anybody listening to this has already heard it, and anybody who has been around long enough probably just skips this part. I could say anything here. I could literally like say like, oh, I'm committing tax fraud, and like no one would know. I'm not. I want to make that clear, but I could say it. I kind of got distracted there. Thank you very much for watching, and always try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.